It's May the 27th. Let's read the Bible. Welcome back, friends, to this year-long journey from Genesis to Revelation in just 1 year. Now, we are almost to the end of the month of May. That tells us summer is coming. We've got another month or so, but we're getting close to the halfway mark of reading through the Bible together. I hope you have enjoyed this. Hey, let me remind you that if you prefer to listen and not watch, if you want to listen while you're driving or while you're doing some work around the house or while you're riding your bike, you're out jogging, walking, something like that, you can do that. Every single one of these Bible readings, all of them from beginning to end, are available in podcast form. You can get them on iTunes, on Google Play, or on Spotify. All of them are free. So what I'm saying is basically what we have right now is everything from January the 1st until today, but God willing, by the end of the year, 365 audio podcasts going all the way through the Bible. So go to Google Play, iTunes, or Spotify, look up Let's Read the Bible. If you just keep clicking through, you'll come to that, download, and listen to any of the podcasts of this Bible reading series. It's all free. We hope you'll take advantage of that. Now, 2 Kings, chapters 10, 11, and 12. You know, there's a lot of people getting killed here in 2 Kings, and some of it appears to be just revenge killing or sort of a political thing. You know, you come to power and take out your opponents. But in this case, Jehu, who's quite an interesting character in the Old Testament, hardly a real man of God, and yet he is doing God's work. By killing the house of Ahab, he is fulfilling the word of the Lord, the judgment payday someday against Ahab for his terrible moral compromise. So we begin to read now, 2 Kings 10. Since Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders, and to the guardians of Ahab's sons, saying, Your master's sons are with you, and you have chariots, horses, a fortified city, and weaponry, so that when this letter arrives, select the most qualified of your master's sons, set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. However, they were terrified and reasoned, Look, 2 kings couldn't stand against him. How can we? So the overseer of the palace, the overseer of the city, the elders, and the guardians sent a message to Jehu. We are your servants, and we will do whatever you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is right. Then Jehu wrote them a second letter saying, If you are on my side, and if you will obey me, bring me the heads of your master's sons at this time tomorrow at Jezreel. All 70 of the king's sons were being cared for by the city's prominent men. When the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered all 70, put their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. When the messenger came and told him, They have brought the heads of the king's sons, the king said, Pile them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate until morning. The next morning, when he went out and stood at the gate, he said to all the people, You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him, but who struck down all these? Know then that not a word the Lord spoke against the house of Ahab will fail, for the Lord has done what he promised through his servant Elijah. So Jehu killed all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, close friends, and priests, leaving him no survivors. Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way, while he was at Beth-Eked of the shepherds, Jehu met the relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah and asked, Who are you? They answered, We're Ahaziah's relatives. We've come down to greet the king's sons and the queen mother's sons. Then Jehu ordered, Take them alive. So they took them alive and then slaughtered them at the pit of Beth-Eked, 42 men. He didn't spare any of them. When he left there, he found Jehonadab, son of Rechab, coming to meet him. He greeted him and then asked, Is your heart one with mine? It is, Jehonadab replied. Jehu said, If it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand, and Jehu pulled him up into the chariot with him. Then he said, Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he let him ride with him in his chariot. When Jehu came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained from the house of Ahab in Samaria until he had annihilated his house, according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him a lot. Now, therefore, summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests. None must be missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing will not live. However, Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. Jehu commanded, consecrate a solemn assembly for Baal. So they called one. Then Jehu sent messengers throughout all Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. Not one failed to come. They entered the temple of Baal, and it was filled from one end to the other. Then he said to the custodian of the wardrobe, bring out the garments for all the servants of Baal. So he brought out their garments. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, entered the temple of Baal, and Jehu said to the servants of Baal, look carefully to see that there are no servants of the Lord here among you, only servants of Baal. Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now, Jehu had stationed 80 men outside, and he warned them, whoever allows any of the men I'm placing in your hands to escape will forfeit his life for theirs. When he finished offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and officers, go in and kill them. Don't let anyone out. So they struck them down with the sword. Then the guards and officers threw the bodies out and went into the inner room of the temple of Baal. They brought out the pillar of the temple of Baal and burned it, and they tore down the pillar of Baal. Then they tore down the temple of Baal and made it a latrine, which it still is today. Jehu eliminated Baal worship from Israel, but he did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit, worshiping the gold calves that were in Bethel and Dan. Nevertheless, the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my sight, and have done to the house of Ahab all that was in my heart, 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel. Yet Jehu was not careful to follow the instruction of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins that Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael defeated the Israelites throughout their territory from the Jordan eastward, the whole land of Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the Arnon Valley, through Gilead to Bashan. The rest of the events of Jehu's reign, along with all his accomplishments and all his might, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehu rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria. His son, Jehoahaz, became king in his place. The length of Jehu's reign over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. What are we going to say about Jehu? He really wasn't a great man. He was a great leader. He clearly, he was a wild chariot driver. He drove his chariot like a maniac. He had zeal to do God's will. He was zealous to wipe out Ahab's family, as the Lord had said. And he got rid of Baal worship. This is all good. But he did not stop the worship of the calves that had been raised up at Dan and Bethel. So he did a lot of good things, and yet he really didn't serve the Lord. And yet God said, for 4 generations, because you have done what I said, well, their sons will be on the throne for 4 generations. It's a great story. Ultimately, he did things that helped his people. He rid the nation of the house of Ahab, and he got rid of Baal worship. That's all to the good. But there's still problems. 2 Kings 11. When Athaliah, Ahaziah's mother, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. Jehosheba, who was King Jehoram's daughter and Ahaziah's sister, secretly rescued Joash, son of Ahaziah, from among the king's sons who were being killed, and put him and the one who nursed him in a bedroom. So he was hidden from Athaliah and was not killed. Joash was in hiding with her in the Lord's temple 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, and the guards. He had them come to him in the Lord's temple, where he made a covenant with them and put them under oath. He showed them the king's son and commanded them, this is what you are to do. 1/3 of you who come on duty on the Sabbath are to provide protection for the king's palace. 1/3 are to be at the foundation gate, and 1/3 at the gate behind the guards. You are to take turns providing protection for the palace. Your two divisions that go off duty on the Sabbath are to provide the king protection at the Lord's temple. Completely surround the king with weapons in hand. Anyone who approaches the ranks is to be put to death. Be with the king in all his daily tasks. So the commanders of hundreds did everything the priest Jehoiada commanded. They each brought their men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty, and came to the priest Jehoiada. The priest gave to the commanders of hundreds King David's spears and shields that were in the Lord's temple. Then the guards stood with their weapons in hand, surrounding the king from the right side of the temple to the left side by the altar and by the temple. Jehoiada brought out the king's son, put the crown on him, and gave him the testimony, and made him king. They anointed him and clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise from the guard and the crowd, she went out to the people at the Lord's temple. She looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar according to the custom. The commanders and the trumpeters were by the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason, treason!" Then the priest Jehoiada ordered the commanders of hundreds in charge of the army, take her out between the ranks and put to death by the sword anyone who follows her, for the priest had said she is not to be put to death in the Lord's temple. So they arrested her, and she went through the horse entrance to the king's palace, where she was put to death. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord, the king, and the people, that they would be the Lord's people, and another covenant between the king and the people. So all the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed its altars and images to pieces, and they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, at the altars. Then Jehoiada, the priest, appointed guards for the Lord's temple. He took the commanders of hundreds, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king from the Lord's temple. They entered the king's palace by way of the guard's gate. Then Joash sat on the throne of the kings. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death by the sword in the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. Can you imagine putting a 7-year-old on the throne? In this case, that was a good thing to do. Here we go. 1 Kings chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebiah. She was from Beersheba. Throughout the time the priest Jehoiada instructed him, Joash did what was right in the Lord's sight. Yet the high places were not taken away. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. Then Joash said to the priests, "All the dedicated silver brought to the Lord's temple, since the silver from vows, and all silver voluntarily given for the Lord's temple. Each priest is to take it from his assessor and repair whatever damage is found in the temple." But by the 23rd year of the reign of King Joash, the priests had not repaired the damage to the temple. So King Joash called the priest Jehoiada and the other priests and asked, "Why haven't you repaired the temple's damage? Since you haven't, don't take any silver from your assessors. Instead, hand it over for the repair of the temple." So the priest agreed that they would receive no silver from the people and would not be the ones to repair the temple's damage. Then the priest Jehoiada took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the Lord's temple. The priest who guarded the threshold put into the chest all the silver that was brought into the Lord's temple. Whenever they saw there was a large amount of silver in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest would go bag up and tally the silver found in the Lord's temple. Then they would give the weighed silver to those doing the work, those who oversaw the Lord's temple. They in turn would pay it out to those working in the Lord's temple, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stonecutters, and would use it to buy timber and quarried stone to repair the damage to the Lord's temple and for all expenses for temple repairs. However, no silver bowls, wick trimmers, sprinkling basins, trumpets, or any articles of gold or silver were made for the Lord's temple from the contributions brought to the Lord's temple. Instead, it was given to those doing the work, and they repaired the Lord's temple with it. No accounting was required from the men who received the silver to pay those doing the work, since they worked with integrity. The silver from the guilt offering and the sin offering was not brought to the Lord's temple, since it belonged to the priest. At that time, King Hazael of Aram marched up and fought against Gath and captured it. Then he planned to attack Jerusalem. So King Joash of Judah took all the items consecrated by himself and his ancestors, Judah's kings, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, as well as all the gold found in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and in the king's palace, and he sent them to King Hazael of Aram. Then Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. The rest of the events of Joash's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Judah's kings. Joash's servants conspired against him and attacked him at Beth Millo on the road that goes down to Silla. It was his servants, Jozabad, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer, who attacked him. He died, and they buried him with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Amaziah became king in his place. I call your attention to one part of this fascinating story. There was a wicked woman named Athaliah, vile, evil, an idol worshiper, a terrible woman who wiped out all the kids, all the sons, except one. And that one son, Joash, as a little baby, was hidden for 6 years in the temple of the Lord by a godly woman by the name of Jehoshaphat. She hid him so that Athaliah couldn't get to him, because Jehoshaphat knew that this little boy Joash was God's man to be the next king. Speaking of sermons, I've heard a long time ago now, 40 years ago, I heard a sermon with an arresting title. If Jehoshaphat doesn't get them, Athaliah will. This is a reminder. They are coming after our kids. They, the workers of evil and moral perversity, are coming after our kids and our grandkids. What we need today is a generation of godly women, especially like Jehoshaphat, who will say, not on my watch. We need godly moms and dads and grandparents who will look at the evil of the world around us and the attacks on children in our day and say, at least of our kids and our grandkids, by God's grace, not on my watch. Our kids need many things. They need our prayers. They need our love. They need our guidance. They need our inspiration. They need our instruction. My friends, sometimes what they really need is our protection. That we love our kids and our grandkids enough to say, we will protect you. We will not. We will do whatever it takes. You know, it's easy to get so busy that we pay no attention to what's happening in the world around us. God bless Jehoshaphat. God bless Jehoshaphat. Whoever preached that sermon was right. If Jehoshaphat doesn't get the kids, Athaliah will. The spirit of Athaliah is alive and well in our generation. So let us say, oh, dear God, whatever it takes, we will stand and fight for our kids and for our grandkids. So then, that's the message for today. Do what it takes. Protect your loved ones. Protect the children and grandchildren. Protect the little ones under your care, because there are people out there who will hurt them if they get a chance. Let us then do what we can, all we can, every day, to protect the children under our care and our influence. On that solemn note, I say, go out and have a great and God-blessed day. Come back tomorrow. We got a ways to go in 2 Kings. See you then.